Speaking of theaters, we saw a movie in theaters recently, but no one else did.
We saw Valerian.
It's called Valerian.
Max and I City of 1,000 Planets. Valerian.
The theater of a 1,000 tickets sold worldwide.
Of the 250 people who watched that movie, we're two of them.
We're two of them.
Yeah.
And we freaking loved it.
Yeah, we really loved that movie.
Okay, let's get this out of the way. Valerian has some very bad wooden protagonist acting. The story is a little cookie cutter at times. I don't care. I threw all that out of the way. This is a movie that is triumphantly enjoying being what it is. It's so much fun. It's vibrant. It's beautiful, inventive. It felt like disappearing to something completely foreign for 2 hours and just seeing something come to life that I'd never really seen before.
And I think a lot of people look at this and they're like, this looks like Avatar, this looks like Star Wars, and it's like, yeah, but it's based on a comic that's been around since before any of those things.
Yeah.
Luc Besson has been wanting to make this for literally his entire life. He read these comics when he was 8, and he actually worked with the guys who wrote them, and he worked on them with The Fifth Element, and they were like, why don't you just make a Valerian movie? And The Fifth Element has some very clear Valerian influences in it. But he, at the time, was like, it's not possible. Like, there's stuff that has to, special effects-wise, you can't do it justice. And, I mean, depending who you ask, he still hasn't done it justice. But I don't know. I'm of the mentality that, if you go to see a movie, and you walk out of there being like, what the hell was that? And somebody's like, oh, you need to know the source material. That's not a good movie because it didn't really achieve what it was attempting to do.
Right.
And if you see a movie that is just entirely hey, don't you like the explosion and when the car does the jump? And you walk out of there and you're like, what a grand time. That's not really a good movie either. It can be a good experience. But in this case, this is Luc Besson, kind of doing somewhere in between. Obviously, you're going to have more of a connection to it if you've read the source material. But it's kind of just this wacky adventure. If you watch it like a cartoon, if you watch it and you're like, this is a cartoon that has human beings in it, you're going to walk away being considerably more impressed.
Which is kind of what I did. I haven't read the comic books, and I didn't care to going in, but I am a big fan of Star Wars. I am a big fan of The Fifth Element. I love the stuff Luc Besson does, and I wanted to sort of disappear in a theater for 2 hours and watch something visually incredible, and I got that.
We're getting these Star Wars movies, but they are decidedly not weird.
Yeah.
They're not Star Wars weird. We get tidbits of weird aliens here and there, but in terms of what the hell am I looking at, that even we got with some of the prequels, we're not really getting that with the new ones. They're focusing more on hey, here's what's Luke Skywalker up to? Here are familiar characters. Where did the Death Star plans go? What was Han Solo like as a kid?
Right.
It's focusing more on kind of the human relatable elements, which I get, but the fact that Luc Besson was like, hey, here's going to be a scene where there's going to be a man who wants to eat a woman, but first he's going to poo-poo a bunch of dishes that are coming his way. And also this man is a terrifying alien caveman. That's a scene. There's a whole scene where they go to this weird virtual reality interdimensional tourist trap. And then there's a chase scene with this giant funny six-legged dog, this giant like Lilo and Stitch of the creature.
Yeah, this nightmare bulldog.
And it's all this stuff. There's stuff in here that's vaguely uncomfortable. Rihanna plays a jellyfish shape-shifting stripper.
Mm-hmm. Burlesque dancer.
Burlesque dancer, because it's PG-13. But yeah, there's stuff, I remember watching The Fifth Element, and there's stuff in there that's kind of it's a little bit too kind of silly and sexy at the same time, and I'm like, I need science fiction to be a little more grounded. And I'm like, yeah, but Chris Tucker's got a funny hat with his hair, and he's doing stuff with stewardesses.
So look.
This leads into that.
Well, hold on. So what happened here? Because this movie cost $215 million to make.
So
it made $15 million in opening weekend, completely tanked the next weekend.
I think
this movie went head to head with stuff like Spider-Man, with Planet of the Apes, with a billion other big blockbuster films.
First of all, it's a license that nobody knows.
Right.
And that's on the fault of, I think, the people promoting it. It's based on a beloved French comic that's been around for ages.
Is it though? I don't know if, because here's the problem with
that goes further.
Yeah.
They should have, before they even announced this was a thing, they should have put money into publishing this stuff and making it more popular stateside. Maybe it's like, oh, here's the 40th anniversary of these comics.
But why?
Getting them.
Why? That didn't happen with Avatar. Avatar was just here's Avatar.
Yeah.
And they said the 3D movie event, and people want to see it.
Right. So after
do people not see new
James
things
Cameron
anymore?
has a precedent as a filmmaker to make. James Cameron has arguably never made a bad movie. You could say that Avatar is a bad movie. You could say Titanic's a bad movie, but they achieve what they set out to do.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's got this kind of unprecedented spectacle. Luc Besson has some misses. He does some weird. He does these weird grounded noir French action movies like Leon, and then he does stuff like Lucy, and then he does The Fifth Element, and then he'll produce Taken, and he doesn't really have an exact. He's kind of. he's always doing something interesting, but it's not really on the same scale as someone like Cameron. Cameron's never done anything small and stripped down. So to come out and be like, hey, here's this thing that I've wanted to make since I was 8 years old, it's using the budget of Avatar, but it's also based on something that's 50 years old.
Well, I think to really pinpoint the reason this movie didn't do well is two things. One, it's a new thing. It is a new thing. And people are less and less inclined to roll the dice on a new thing to go spend money at a movie theater.
That's the thing, is it's not a new thing. It's not based on a...
It is a new thing to 99.9% of the universe.
That's what I'm saying, is that they put time into being like, hey, like Sin City was essentially a new thing if you haven't read the comics.
Right.
And that movie blew the hell up, you know? Same with Watchmen. If you establish the thing it's based on, it becomes a familiar thing once it's in theaters. The thing is, though, is at no point in my history of going into comic shops and being like, what's good? Has Valerian come in front of me, and I go out of my way to find stuff that's weird and interesting and strange, and Valerian is entirely like up my alley, the original comics, but for whatever reason they never like Amazon never recommended it. Like, it's one of those things that doesn't have enough of a presence stateside.
Is it because they didn't tell people this is a comic book movie? Do you have to actually spell that out for people now to get them to go see it?
I mean, conversely, look at like the Tintin movie. Like, that did okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it bombed. I don't think it blew the hell up like they wanted it to.
Well, that's a character that people.
But that's a beloved character that
yeah.
everyone knows about. And I'm saying that there's no like, people weren't familiar with Valerian, and I think there was kind of a certain level of buck passing because the way they funded this wasn't. This was an unprecedented bomb in terms of budget and expectations, but it wasn't funded by one studio. There was a weird thing where Luc Besson put up his own salary and raised money from a bunch of different international investors. So I think a lot of people lost money, but it wasn't like one studio in Hollywood being like, you're never gonna work in this town again. It's just a bunch of people being like, well, rats, that didn't work out the way we planned. So, but because of that, at the same time, I don't think anybody was, if this had been one studio producing it, they would have been like, okay, we need to have like milestones going into this. Like, we need to make people aware of what Valerian is. This movie came out the week of Comic-Con, and it had no presence at Comic-Con.
Which is crazy.
It's insane. I mean, there are movies that have been out already that are coming out on Blu-ray that had bigger presence, that had presence.
That's the other big thing, right? I think the timing of this thing ultimately is what killed it. Like, I think this would have been fun in September.
Yeah.
You know, October maybe. Like, maybe not. Like, Avatar killed over Christmas, right? That's where Star Wars kills, right?
Yeah.
That's when they send movies like that out. And that's not what happened here. This got put out in the dead of summer against 3 big-ass movies, and it got crushed.
Yeah.
And that sucks, because it's like, A, we'll never get another movie, we'll never get a sequel to it. We might never get another movie like it. We might never get Luc Besson working with a budget like this, working with CG like this. And also, like, I don't know what this means for original new sci-fi that maybe is based on something from 40, 50 years ago. But what do you do with a big budget sci-fi movie that doesn't say Star Wars across the front of it?
That's
like,
a good
that
question.
scares me, right?
It's got to say Avatar or Star Wars or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if this is the kind of thing that sounds interesting to you, if you thought the movie looked weird and strange, it is. Maybe go see it before it leaves theaters. I don't know, you know how long it's going to stick around. I think it might develop a bizarre cult following. People were like, hey, is this like John Carter? Like, not really. John Carter was beautiful but sort of boring. Is this like Jupiter's Legacy? It's like, no, Jupiter's Legacy, or Jupiter's Ascending.
Yeah.
Jupiter's Ascending. Jupiter's Legacy is another thing. Jupiter's Ascending was very weird, but in like kind of a sci-fi original sort of way, and considerably less impressive than most of the stuff the Wachowskis usually do. So people like that. Some people like John Carter. This is just, if you like The Fifth Element, go see this movie and just don't expect it to be story-wise incredible. But
yeah, seriously. It's also like one of the last movies I've seen with 3D glasses on where I was like, oh, you made a movie for 3D glasses instead of just putting 3D glasses on top of me when I walk into a movie.
Yeah. Hey everybody, we love to talk about funny spaceman stuff here on Up at Noon. You should check out the interview I did with the funniest spaceman of all, Luc Besson, director of Valerian. And hey, Star Wars Episode 2 is full of weird things. Here are 15 of our favorite of them, and be sure to watch Up at Noon every Thursday at noon Pacific Time on IGN.